Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. Women's rights and xenophobia and all those other isms that threaten to tear down the rights of people and offer privilege to a select few. It's a global issue. There are many governments out there that think that if you look or act a certain way that you should be minimalized, that you should be seen as less than human. We're all human beings, and we should be seen as human beings, and we should all be protected globally under such rights. There are things out there, like in Uganda, where they are doing crackdowns on those who are non-binary. If you don't follow the strict rules of what men and women are supposed to do, there's strict rules around the roles and guidelines for being male versus female, that there are extreme penalties for it. And Uganda is not the only country to do that. And there are other countries that want to completely eliminate women from education, from the workplace, and minimalize them in society so that they are no longer heard. And yet, there are countries that if you don't look, sound, or seem to be the same as what they think the majority of you should be, they want to eliminate you. Just because we live in a democratic society, Canada or the United States, doesn't mean that racism, bigotry, and things like that aren't prominent in our society. And we need to do things to eliminate those things from happening, and that will promote equality for all of us. So let's listen to the UN segments. We're going to hear from the Secretary General of the United Nations speak about women's rights, and we're also going to hear about some other global issues that are happening around the world with earthquakes and wars that are still occurring. One, because one country sees the other country as less than human. That how these issues are unfolding for today, and what is going to happen to help those who are falling victim to either a disaster or a war that has hit their country and devastated them. So let's listen to was said in the United Nations today.
Afternoon. I'll start off with a statement on the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Secretary General welcomes recent engagements by the President of Angola and the African Union champion for peace and reconciliation, João Lourenço, with the M23 rebel group, which resulted in the announcement of a ceasefire beginning tomorrow, March 7th, in compliance with the decisions of the African Union Peace and Security Council that were taken on 17th February in Addis Ababa. The Secretary General urges the M23 to respect the ceasefire in order to create conditions for its full and effective withdrawal from all occupied areas in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, in line with the decisions of the Luanda mini-summit held on the 23rd of November of last year. The Secretary General condemns all violence against civilians and renews his call on all Congolese and foreign armed groups to lay down their weapons and disarm unconditionally. He urges all parties to the conflict to ensure immediate and unfettered humanitarian access to the affected population and to ensure protection of civilians and respect for international humanitarian law. He calls on all actors to refrain from hate speech and incitement to violence. The Secretary General reaffirms the continued support of the United Nations to the Luanda and Nairobi processes. And just to give you a bit more context on the ground, on Saturday, the head of the UN peacekeeping mission there, Bintou Keita, concluded her mission to the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo with a press conference in Goma. She outlined that the mission is maintaining a robust presence in M23-controlled areas to protect civilians and continues to provide support to the Congolese armed forces in strict compliance with human rights due diligence policy. She echoed the calls for a rigorous respect of the ceasefire and that was announced on Friday, and urged the M23 to withdraw from the occupied areas and disarm unconditionally. This morning, the Secretary General spoke to the Commission on the status of women. He said that this year's event takes on an even greater significance as progress won over decades is vanishing before our very eyes. In Afghanistan, for example, he said that women and girls have been erased from public life. Gender equality is growing more distant. And the Secretary General added that on the current track, UN Women puts it at 300 years away. He called for urgent action to equalize power in three ways. First, on increasing education, income, and employment for women and girls, particularly in the global South. Second, he added, leaders must promote women's and girls' full participation in leadership and in science and technology, from governments to boardrooms and classrooms. Finally, he called for the creation of a safe digital environment for women and girls. Full remarks were shared with you. And as you know, Secretary General is back here, obviously. He was in Doha over the weekend, where he spoke yesterday at the plenary of the 5th Conference on the Least Developed Countries. He told delegates that there is perhaps no more important issue around which we can and must unite than transforming the words of the Doha Program of Action into results. We don't have a moment to lose, he said. He added that least developed countries are being stranded amidst rising tide of crisis, uncertainty, climate chaos, in the deep global injustice, adding that deeply dysfunctional and unfair global financial system is handing the LDCs the rawest of deals, with the countries facing interest rates at up to 8 times that higher developed countries. Full remarks were shared with you. Also, over the weekend, we shared a statement in which the Secretary General commended delegates at the Intergovernmental Conference that finalized the text to ensure the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. The breakthrough, which covers nearly 2/3 of the ocean, marks the culmination of nearly 2 decades of work and builds on the legacy of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. This action is a victory for multilateralism and for global efforts to counter the destructive trends facing health now and for generations to come. Full statement is online. This morning, the head of the peacekeeping mission in South Sudan, Nicholas Haysom, briefed the council. He welcomed the transitional government's commitment to implement the peace agreement, as well as a clear statement that there will be no more extensions of the timelines contained in the agreed roadmap. He said 2023 would be a make or break year and test all the parties to the peace agreement. He will speak to you at the stakeout. Also, programming note on Wednesday, the SRSG for Afghanistan is in person here. She's speaking to the council, and I spoke to her earlier today. She will go to the stakeout. Turning to Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues on the ground tell us that the security situation in the frontline town of Bakhmut in the eastern Donetsk region has deteriorated significantly in recent days. Intense shelling is compounding an already precarious humanitarian situation. Access to the town remains limited, with a significant decrease in the number of volunteer groups still operating there. Local authorities have reported to us at least 8 civilian casualties in the last 48 hours. This includes 1 woman who was killed and 2 men who were seriously injured trying to cross a makeshift bridge out of Bakhmut. Local volunteers continue to assist as many as 4,500 civilians living in town out of a pre-war population of about 73,000. Just to recap that in February, we sent 6 interagency convoys to Donetsk region carrying food, water, and winter shelter material for over 77,000 people. Also, on March 2nd, there was a deadly attack on a residential building in the city of Zaporizhzhia. Our humanitarian colleagues on the ground say that 13 deaths, including an 8-month-old child, have been confirmed as of today. 2 are still missing. Denise Brown, the humanitarian coordinator in Ukraine for the UN, met local authorities at the site yesterday. She stressed that civilian infrastructure are protected by international humanitarian law and should never be targeted. Our humanitarian partners have provided emergency supplies, including food, clothing, bedding, hygiene kits, and psychosocial support, as well as cash assistance. Turning to Syria, 1 month after the devastating earthquake, we and our partners continue to scale up our response. At least 8.8 million people have been affected, with a majority expected to need humanitarian assistance. Since the 9th, 583 trucks loaded with aid from 7 UN agencies have crossed into northwest Syria via 3 available border crossings. Our humanitarian partners estimate that homes for some 2.7 million people have been damaged in Aleppo, Hama, Latakia, and Homs. Those displaced are in collective centers in host communities. More funding is urgently needed for the humanitarian response. Our flash appeal is 52% funded, which means we have $206 million out of 400 required. Today, and also in terms of Turkey, we are continuing to provide, with our partners so far, 5.7 million food packages and hot meals, 42,000 tents, 278,000 blankets, 181,000 mattresses, and 169,000 hygiene kits. The billion-dollar appeal for Turkey is 9.6% funded, which means 96.6 million American dollars. Quick update from Vanuatu, which I don't know if you saw the reports, was hit by 2 consecutive Category 4 cyclones and a 6.5 magnitude earthquake just last week and over the weekend. Authorities are telling us that over 200,000 people were impacted. That's about 63% of the population. Under the leadership of the acting resident coordinator to Vanuatu, Heike Alafson, our regional office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and the UN team is supporting a government-led response. While there still is a power outage and communication challenges across the capital city, UN and humanitarian personnel partners are continuing to work with authorities and civil society representatives. Our team on the ground had pre-positioned items in Vanuatu ahead of the cyclone season. These have now been distributed by our local partners. UN agencies are working closely with the Vanuatu Red Cross Society to distribute emergency supplies. More are expected to be shipped to support the response efforts. Our team is supporting authorities with additional life-saving needs, and assessment has offered immediately to deploy staff to further assist on the ground. Turning to another natural disaster, 6 months after the devastating floods that hit Pakistan, our UN team and partners have now reached more than 7 million people with food and other essential services as part of the government-led flood response. We're also supporting authorities to help communities recover, restore their livelihoods, and prepare for the next monsoon season in a few months. However, only 30% of the flood response plan has been funded, and rates of children malnutrition are particularly of concern. UNICEF and its partners have reached more than 1 million children and close to 850,000 mothers with life-saving nutrition interventions that help avert a significant number of deaths. However, only 1/3 of the child nutrition response is funded, leaving 12 million children suffering from stunting, or being at risk of stunting. For its part, the World Health Organization has reached more than 3 million people with health services. FAO has provided food security and agricultural assistance to 7 million, although 4 million people are still at risk. Tomorrow, 11 o'clock, there will be a briefing here. That's what we do here. There will be a briefing here sponsored, by the Permanent Mission of Ireland with the Angino Karama on women, peace, and security agenda in the Arab region. Speakers will include Zahra Langi, Samia El Hashimi, Amani Aruri, and Brigitte Chelabian and Suzanne Aref, all of Karama. At noon, our guest will be the resident humanitarian coordinator for Turkey, Alvaro Rodriguez. He will join us virtually from Hatay province, which is one of the hardest hit provinces in Turkey. Edith.
Thank you, Steph. Does the Secretary General have any comment on the sentencing of the exiled Belarus opposition leader Sviatlana Tikhanovskaya to 15 years in prison?
This is yet another example of the concern we've expressed of the shrinking space for civil society and for human rights activists in Belarus.
And does the Secretary General have any comment on witnesses saying that Myanmar soldiers raped, killed, and beheaded 17 people in a village in central Myanmar in the Sagang region? Their bodies were found.
I had not seen that horrendous report, but we will check. We will check and get back to you. Maggie and then James.
Stefan, Syria, some aid groups are saying that although there are 3 border crossings now into northwest Syria, the 2 new ones aren't being utilized sufficiently, that they're only accounting for something like 20% of all the trucks that are going through. Are you using them full out?
We're using them full out to the best of our ability. I mean, we're very focused.
Have you heard any complaints?
If you go back, we hear complaints all the time. Even before this tragedy, the Secretary General had been calling on the international on us being able to use more crossings. We were able to now to use 2 more crossings. Our colleagues are trying to push as much aid through those 3 crossings as possible, based obviously on the availability of aid, funding, and of trucks.
Okay. And one other, several Western governments are talking about banning TikTok on their official devices and phones and laptops and such. Does the UN allow TikTok on UN devices?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any rules to that effect, depending on the age of the staff, obviously. James.
Yeah,
we tend
to Syria.
skew older than most governments.
Back to Syria. Can you confirm that there's been a new declaration by the Syrian Ministry for Oil to all international organizations and diplomatic representations in Syria? Apparently now all fuel used by anyone international must be purchased in US dollars, not in Syrian pounds. Given the scale of the UN's operations currently
I'll check with our country
in Syria,
team. I've not heard.
I'm told the difference is substantial in the cost that the Syrian government would be receiving from the United Nations over that, if you could check for us. Secondly, on the UK has announced, and the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has publicly said there will be a new policy for migrants. The new policy will be that any migrant who arrives on a small boat will be deported, no matter what the circumstances. Is the UK in breach? This is the Prime Minister says he's going to put this legislation through. So if he does, is the UK in breach of its international obligations on refugees?
I will let our colleagues at UNHCR speak on the legal aspect, as they are the guarantors of the Convention on Refugees. But I will restate what we say about any country, whether it's the UK, the US, countries in the global south, is that countries need to uphold international law. People who claim asylum need to be heard. Those claims need to be processed. Migrants need to be treated with human dignity and with their human rights intact. Linda and then Deji.
Thank you, Steph. Apropos of the question about the 3 Syrian borders, I was wondering what the status of or the latest developments in terms of the cross-line.
No updates on the cross line, so no new cross line convoys to report. Deji.
First, a quick question on the Black Sea Grain Initiative. After the Russian government released a report last week to criticizing the deal, any new development on the extension of this deal?
We continue to be in discussions with all interested parties. The Secretary General's wish is clear, that he wants to see a continuation of this deal, which is extremely important.
Will anybody brief us here this week?
No. Yes.
To the follow-up, I have another question.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, finish.
No,
finish.
you follow the Black Sea.
Once you guys decide to finish your negotiations, you can pay attention to me.
We're very
Yes.
polite here in this press room. Just to follow on from that question, you said you're in touch with all the parties. Is there any discussion about changing the deal, or is it just a straight up talking about
I
a
think
rollover?
we all know how the deal gets continued is in what was signed, so that is clear. There are discussions going on. I will not get into the granularity and who is saying what and what everybody's position is. I think our overall position is to see a continuation of the deal.
Okay, so it does say if no one announces their intention to not continue.
That is
the
a
deal,
statement of fact.
that it would continue, but it also says something about it's either if a party says they don't want to continue it, or if they want to amend it in some way. So is anyone talking about amending?
Again, there's a lot of discussions going on. I don't want to say anything that would have a negative impact. Deji, you can resume your role.
Okay. My next question is concerning DPRK. Last Friday, U.S. and South Korea announced a large-scale military exercise that's going to happen maybe since next week. And after that, DPRK released a statement and called the United Nations and the international community to demand an immediate halt to this drill, and said this have pushed tensions to an extremely dangerous level. So has the UN received any of the requests to facilitate DPRK to stop this?
I will check whether we've received any official communication from the DPRK. What I can tell you is that we remain concerned about the rising tensions on the Korean Peninsula. Again, it needs to be reiterated, the Secretary General's call for the full implementation of all relevant Security Council resolutions. His position has been cleared. He's always called for a resumption of talks and for all concerned to foster and induce an environment that's conducive to such talks. The only way forward is through diplomatic engagement, and for what he wants to see, sustainable peace and the complete and verifiable denuclearization of the nuclear peninsula. Yes, sir.
Mr. Stefan, thank you. A few months back, UN Secretary General, in a statement said that Pakistan should have a de-escalation in a political situation, political tension in Pakistan between incumbent government and ex-Prime Minister Pakistan, Mr. Imran Khan. Till today, like 75 criminal cases has been registered against him, including terrorism charges. And there's a big crackdown going on in Pakistan on the media and stuff like that. And most importantly, I think on 26th of October, you said in a statement, the killing of one of the most prominent Pakistani journalist, Arshad Sharif, in Kenya in a very brutal and mysterious way. Did you hear anything back from Kenyan government? Because you demanded the investigation to be speed up or be transparent.
We have not heard anything. I don't think I used the term demand, but we called for. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So I've not heard. We've not heard anything back. It was not a formal request to keep the UN informed. It was a call for a transparent investigation. We'd have to check what the status is. On the internal situation in Pakistan, I have nothing to add than what we've already said.
Mr. Stefan, United Nations Secretary General Mr. Guterres has said that Pakistan should de-escalate the situation. As you said, that we are already going through a very tough time because of floods and everything, and the political situation is not—it's getting worse.
Right. No, but I'm saying I've not nothing.
So did
to
you hear
add
anything about the
no? I've
situation in
nothing to
Pakistan?
add to what the Secretary General said at the time. Yvonne, and then we'll go to Gregory, and then Stefano.
Thank you, Stefan. So listening to the Secretary General's remarks to the Commission on the Status of Women, it's very clear that gender equality is something that's very important to the Secretary General. And I just wonder, has he considered making some kind of grand gesture to underline his point, like, for example, stepping aside and giving his job to a woman?
No, resigning is not something the Secretary General is contemplating in doing in any way, shape, or form. He will continue and has, I think, shown demonstrable results in improving and reaching gender parity in the senior posts that he appoints, right? Because he doesn't have the authority over the whole administration. Putting in place a strategy to reach gender parity at the professional levels, to ensure that there's more equitable and clearer representation, and I think what he has done in terms of appointments was done extremely quickly within UN standards. I think within 2 years he had reached the parity, also including the resident coordinators on the ground, and that is a policy he will continue with a lot of energy. Gregory, then Stefano.
Thank you, Stefan. The U.S. refused on issuing the visas for some of Russian delegates to participate on open-ended working group on information. The Russian side urged the Secretariat to take some measures to prevent this kind of situation in future.
Sorry, the issue of visas?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that the Secretary General, his legal counsel has been very, very much focused on ensuring that the obligations are met, and that all delegations that have business in front of the United Nations here in New York are granted the visas as they should be. Signor Vacara, and then we'll go to the TV.
Grazie, Stefan. First about Tunisia. A couple of weeks ago, maybe a little bit more, I asked if the Secretary General had any contact with the President of Tunisia. This regarding the arrest at that time of political leaders. And since then, other things happened. There is a crackdown on migrants, accusation of racism, and so on. So, did the Secretary General had any contact with the government of Tunisia around this issue?
He directly has not had contact. Obviously, through our country office and other means, we remain in contact with the Tunisian authorities. I can tell you that we're gravely concerned about the spate of arrests that we have seen, the arbitrary arrests, especially focusing on the political opposition, on civil society, journalists, and also the increasing crackdown that we've seen on migrants, which is also of concern. And I can only say that we condemn without reservation any and all statements that are xenophobic, that are racist, that are meant to increase racial hatred.
But if he's so concerned, shouldn't if the situation gets worse, will he attempt to have a direct contact with the Tunisian?
Secretary General is always ready to speak to any world leader when he thinks it will be productive to the situation.
And then another thing about the problems of the migrants, the crisis of the migrants in the Mediterranean. The Italian foreign minister just say in an interview that it's not a problem that Italy can resolve alone, but this time he didn't say only, all Europe has to help. He says UN has to help. What do you think?
I didn't see the exact statements. I can tell you that the UN, in terms of UNHCR, the International Organization for Migration, has been helping and assisting countries of destination, countries of transit, countries of origin. I mean, the minister is right in saying that Italy can't do it alone. Not one country can do it alone. Every country needs to show solidarity. And the best way to forge a path forward would be for every member state to implement the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration, and take migration out of the hands of criminal gangs who are exploiting vulnerable people by selling them, I don't even want to say seats, selling them the places on unsafe crafts when it comes to Mediterranean, putting people's life at risk for an exorbitant amount of money. And we see it also on the southern border in this country. We see it throughout Central America. Everything is in the hands of criminal gangs, and it shouldn't be. Ibtisam, and then we'll go to the screen, then we'll do round two.
So follow up on what you said regarding condemnation of any racist in Tunisia, and regarding condemnation of any racist statements. Does this include the statement that President Said made about a week ago, or maybe less, describing or say about immigrants from other African countries, and saying that, talking about conspiracy to change the demography in Tunisia, etc.?
Yes, racism is racism, xenophobia is xenophobia. Abdelhamid, and then Iftikhar.
Stefan, I have a few questions. I hope you will be patient with me.
Have I never been patient with you? I'm always patient, Abdelhamid. But I fear that with that kind of opening, I'm going to have to be extra patient. But go ahead.
Okay, thank you. First, the Secretary General gave an important interview with Al Jazeera while he was in Doha. My question, why you didn't distribute the transcript of that important interview? Because he said something about Palestine that normally we don't hear here, about how the Palestinians in Gaza are living in hell, and how the UN doesn't have toes and teeth to enforce its resolutions. That means he's frustrated with so many resolutions adopted, but they are not enforced when it comes to Palestine. Can you distribute the transcript of that interview, please?
The short answer is that I know some foreign ministries do transcript of interviews that their principal does. I do not have the manpower or the money to do it. I would say that Al Jazeera is far from being an obscure network. Their video is on YouTube. It's shown. I mean, it's accessible to all. It's not a double secret interview. So I wish we could do more to promote what the Secretary General says. At some point, we have a finite resources to do what we do.
Thank you. My second question, on Friday, 19 diplomats from different countries, including Mexico, Malta, Switzerland, UK, France, Italy, and others, visited the town of Hawara. They spoke to the people there. They saw with their own eyes what happened. They condemned the violence of the settlers. Such a nice, humane move. Why not, Mr. Thor Winsland, take that step and go visit Hawara and speak with the people and show some humane solidarity with the people?
Well, I don't know if Mr. Venislan or somebody else from the UN team has been to the village, but I can tell you that we have condemned in no uncertain terms what happened in the village, as well as the comments that were made by an Israeli minister after the operation. Maggie, and then... go ahead.
One more. 13 people of Jabal al-Mukabbir received notices to demolish their houses. Itamar Ben Ghafir today said that demolishing of houses will not stop during the month of Ramadan. And he will continue with this policy. Do you have any comment on that?
We've always spoken out against the demolition of houses, regardless of when they occur. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Stefan. This morning, in his statement at the Security Council on South Sudan, the special representative said that we believe that the visit of the ecumenical pilgrimage for peace led by His Holiness the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury and the moderator of the Church of Scotland have served to echo the message of peace called for by South Sudan. I assume he's speaking for the Secretary General, but in general, what is the Secretary General's position on religious leaders and their ability or not to promote peace, whether in South Sudan or other?
The short answer is yes. Mr. Haysom, as Special Representative Secretary General, speaks for the Secretary General. In this, religious leaders have great potential to do good, to work for peace. I think the joint visit by the Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the court. No, I can't remember the title of the head of the Church of the moderator. Thank you, of the Church of Scotland, was extremely important. Religious leaders have a lot of power and a lot of influence. It is critical that they use it for good. You will get a short question after I hear a brief question from Margaret, and then James, and then we'll come back to you.
So brief.
So brief.
Has the Secretary General had any direct conversation with President Bashar al-Assad since the extra 2 border crossings were opened?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, James.
As you
hold on, I'll get you in a second. That's okay. That's okay.
I have brief questions, but I have 2. Number 1, Cox's Bazar and the fire. What are the UN's priorities now?
Yeah, I mean,
what's going on?
We're talking to our colleagues at UNHCR to try to rebuild the lives of and the houses of these tens of thousands of people who have been so severely impacted. I mean, as we sit here, it's hard to imagine what they've gone through in terms of leaving their homeland, in terms of living now for more than 3 years in a camp, and then have the little they have destroyed. We will do whatever we can. This will require additional responses from the international community, and more financing. We hope people see it in their heart to help in any way they can. These people who seem to have been punished 3 times for no reason, I would add.
And lastly, from me, there is a very distressing video now on social media, which I would urge people to be very careful if you're going to watch it, because I've seen it and it's very distressing, of a Ukrainian soldier who is surrounded by Russian troops, and then, even though he's clearly then a prisoner of war, he is executed. Now, I understand the video will need to be verified, but it's all over social media now. What is the Secretary General's, if that is verified as true, what is his reaction to the cold-blooded execution of the soldier?
I haven't seen the video. What is important is that the international community for the Red Cross have access to prisoners of war on both sides, full access, and that every party to this conflict obey and respect international law that protects prisoners of war. In addition, showing this kind of a video and propagating it is also, I think, against, if not against the law, immoral.
So as you said in your opening remarks about the floods in Pakistan, you said that we're still short of the aid money for the much-needed aid for the victim of the floods. Can you elaborate a little bit about the, because I missed that, can you elaborate how much is the aid money is missing and why?
It's missing because people haven't given it. Right, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty clear, you know, we're not sitting on secret money. So we put out an appeal. If the appeal is only 40% funded, it means by my math that we still need 60%. And the international community and those countries that have the money have not stepped up. In terms of the details of the appeal, we can share with you the links on the OCHA website, and you can see everything in detail.
The Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency António Guterres, to address the Commission. Thank you for being here, Secretary General. We know you came all the way from Doha to be with us, and we know again this evening you are on your way out, but we do appreciate your presence with us today. You have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, friends. The session of the Commission on the Status of Women is one of the most important annual events at the United Nations. And it takes on even greater significance at a time when women's rights are being abused, threatened, and violated around the world. Progress, won over decades, is vanishing before our eyes. In Afghanistan, women and girls have been erased from public life. In many places, women's sexual and reproductive rights are being rolled back. In some countries, girls go to school, risk kidnapping and assault. In others, police prey on vulnerable women they have sworn to protect. Gender equality is growing more distant. On the current track, where Newman puts it 300 years away. Maternal mortality is increasing. One woman dies every 2 minutes during pregnancy or childbirth. Most of these deaths are preventable. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic continues for millions of girls forced out of school, mothers and caregivers forced out of paid employment, and children forced into early marriage. From Ukraine to the Sahel, crises and conflicts affect women and girls first and worst. And at the international level, some countries now even oppose the inclusion of a gender perspective in multilateral negotiations.
Dear friends, the patriarchy is fighting back, but so are we. And I am here to say, loud and clear, the United Nations stands with women and girls everywhere. The Deputy Secretary General and the Executive Director of UN Women recently visited Afghanistan with a clear message for the authorities. Women and girls have fundamental human rights, and we will never give up fighting for them. The United Nations country teams and humanitarian agencies around the world are helping to provide practical support and care for women in crisis situations. Gender equality and investment in girls and women are central to all our humanitarian and development work. Our political and peacekeeping missions continue to promote women's participation in all peace processes, and they have overcome enormous obstacles, and they ensure women's priorities are integral to our political work. This is the only route to sustainable, enduring peace. Distinguished representatives, dear friends, let's be clear. The international frameworks are not working for the world's women and girls. They need to change. My initiatives for a stimulus to get the Sustainable Development Goals on track and to reform the global financial system aim to increase resources for investment in women and girls at the country level. My report on our common agenda highlights gender equality in all that we do. I have instructed the UN system that all our support to member states in preparing for the Summit of the Future must reflect our commitment to gender equality and women's rights. As part of our common agenda, I commissioned an independent review of our capacity around gender equality across all pillars of our work. The conclusions and recommendations will address structures, funding, and leadership so that we can better deliver for the women of the world. Gender parity in our personnel is a vital step towards gender equality in our work. 5 years into the system-wide strategy on gender parity throughout the UN system, we have come a long way. We reached gender parity among the 180 members of the senior leadership and our resident coordinators throughout the countries of the world. Regarding our professional staff, the Secretariat as a whole is forecast to be close to parity in 2025, which is 3 years before the deadline. But, and I must be clear, the obstacles are more difficult to surmount in the missions on the ground. And that is why now our efforts will prioritize areas where progress has been slow. And I hope that member states will understand the need for change and will support us in adapting our rules to facilitate our movement towards gender parity.
Distinguished delegates, dear friends, your focus this year on closing gender gaps in technology and innovation could not be more timely. Because as technology races ahead, women and girls are being left behind. The math is simple. Without the insights and creativity of half the world, science and technology will fulfill just half their potential. 3 billion people are still unconnected to the internet, but the majority of them, women and girls, in developing countries. And in least developed countries, just 19% of women are online. Globally, girls and women make up just 1/3 of students in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In the tech industry, men outnumber women 2 to 1. But in artificial intelligence, only about 1 out of 5 workers is a woman. And artificial intelligence is shaping our future world. Let's hope it will not be shaped in a totally gender-biased way. The COVID-19 pandemic magnified inequalities in access to the internet and intensified the dangers women and girls face online. Misogynistic disinformation and misinformation flourish on social media platforms. So-called gender trolling is specifically aimed at silencing women and forcing them out of public life. The stories may be fake, but the damage done is very real. Distinguished delegates, dear friends, centuries of patriarchy, discrimination, and harmful stereotypes have created a huge gender gap in science and technology. Women account for just 3% of Nobel Prize winners in science categories. 3 years ago, Emmanuelle Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna made history as the first all-women team to win a Nobel Prize in science, ever. And teams of men have shared the prize 172 times. Big data is the new gold and the foundation of today's political and business decisions. But it often ignores gender differences or turns a blind eye to women altogether, resulting in products and services that bake in gender inequality from the start. We see gender-biased algorithms proliferate everywhere. And we cannot let the Silicon Valleys of our world become Death Valleys for women's rights. We need the full contributions of all for a future in which humanity controls technology rather than the other way around. And gender inequality is a question of power. And today I call for urgent action to equalize power in 3 ways. First, increasing education, income and employment for women and girls, particularly in the Global South. Connecting women in the Global South to the online world requires us to address rising levels of poverty and inequality. Second, leaders must promote women's and girls' full participation and leadership in science and technology, from governments to boardrooms and classrooms. The United Nations' first ever report on technology, innovation, education and gender equality provides many recommendations. They must be followed. It calls for gender-responsive education and skills training, algorithms that align with human rights and gender equality, and investment in bridging the digital gender divide. More than ever, we need collective action by governments, civil society, the private sector, and the technology community. And third, we must create a safe digital environment for women and girls. The United Nations is working with other stakeholders to advance a code of conduct for information integrity on digital platforms. The goal is to reduce harm and increase accountability while defending the right to freedom of expression. Excellencies, promoting women's full contributions to science, technology and innovation is not an act of charity or a favor to women. It is a must, and it benefits everyone. When women get medical services online, their families and communities are healthier. When women access online banking and resources without bias, they start businesses that benefit their societies and economies. When women have access to safe digital platforms, they build communities that can change the world. Look at the Me Too movement. And when women scientists and technologists tackle global problems, they multiply the chance of finding solutions. Many technology leaders, especially women, know that inequality and exclusion are a moral and commercial dead end. Women and girls are leading efforts to make science and technology accessible, inclusive and safe. And in many countries, girls are studying science, technology and math in record numbers. This must be followed everywhere. Women and girls will not be silenced. Their demands for their rights and freedoms echo around the globe, and the Commission on the Status of Women is a dynamo and catalyst for the transformation we need. Together, let us push back against the pushback on women's rights, against misogyny, and forward for women, girls, and our world. And I thank you.
I thank the Secretary.
Let's focus on Palestine versus Israel, and there's a lot of questions and dialogue around demolition of homes, and the United Nations stands firmly against such acts, and stands firmly that Palestine and Israel should try to find a way so that everyone can coexist. Well, one of the real problems is that the politics of the area is not getting along with each other. It isn't just simply the people don't get along. It is that the governments aren't getting along. Those who represent the people as a whole don't get along. The people themselves, if you were to go and ask them about it, they just simply want to all exist equally together. And that's what we all want out of our world, is to simply just all exist equally together. Thank you for listening today. Please find that subscribe button wherever it is so you can get continued updates from us. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.